The story of the Cursed Banyan Tree. In the rural heart of Rajasthan, nestled between arid lands and ancient ruins, there stood a banyan tree, one that villagers never approached after sunset. The tree was infamous, its twisted roots and gnarled branches stretching into the sky like a great, skeletal beast. For centuries, it had earned a reputation as the most haunted spot in the region. Locals whispered of dark spirits that lurked within, of curses that had consumed those who dared to get too close. The mere mention of the tree sent shivers down their spines. Ajay had heard the stories many times while growing up. They were the kind of tales that fascinated and terrified him in equal measure, but to him, they were just that, stories. He, like his friends, considered the warnings nothing more than exaggerated folklore, the stuff of overactive imaginations. So when an opportunity came to visit the tree with a group of close friends, Ajay jumped at the chance, eager to prove that there was nothing to fear. It was a cool evening in early November when Ajay, along with his childhood friends, Ravi, Samir, and Vikram, set out for the banyan tree. They'd gathered at Ajay's house, equipped with flashlights, snacks, and a casual confidence that betrayed their growing nervousness. The tree was about 2 kilometers from the village, in an open field surrounded by nothing but dry, cracked earth. The villagers, wary of their plan, had warned them to stay away, especially after dark. But that only fueled their curiosity. As they walked, the sky darkened, and a strange stillness settled over the landscape. The usual sounds of the evening, chirping crickets, the distant calls of birds, faded into an unsettling silence. No one spoke, though a growing unease began to creep into the group. When they reached the banyan tree, it was more imposing than any of them had imagined. The roots, thick and snake-like, coiled around the earth as if ready to ensnare anyone who dared approach. The branches, sprawling and twisted, seemed to stretch out like the limbs of a monster in the fading light. There was something about the air around the tree. It felt heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on their chests. "We made it," Ajay said, breaking the silence, trying to sound casual. Samir shined his flashlight toward the tree's center, revealing a hollow at the base. "There it is. The cursed tree," he said, half laughing but clearly unnerved. Ravi smirked, though his eyes betrayed his nervousness. "We're just wasting time. Let's take a picture and go." But as the group moved closer to the tree, something shifted. A cold breeze swept through the field, chilling them to the bone. The leaves rustled in the wind, but there was an unnatural quality to the sound. It wasn't just the breeze stirring them. It was something else, something alive. "Did you hear that?" Vikram asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Ajay replied, though he, too, felt it. There was something in the air, a faint whisper carried on the wind, but it was too low to understand. It sounded like murmurs, voices too distant to make out clearly. "Let's just take the picture and go," Samir suggested, his eyes darting nervously toward the shadows beneath the tree. Ajay nodded, and they quickly gathered near the tree, trying to maintain their composure. But as Ravi raised his phone to take a picture, his flashlight flickered and then went out. "Seriously? Not now," he muttered, shaking the flashlight. Vikram stepped forward with his flashlight, illuminating the tree's base, but something made him pause. His hand trembled slightly as he shined the light deeper into the tree's hollow. There, among the gnarled roots, he thought he saw movement, something shifting in the shadows. "There's something in there," Vikram said, his voice tight with fear. Ajay stepped closer, peering into the dark hollow. The light barely penetrated the thick tangle of roots, but he too saw it, a faint, shifting figure, like a silhouette blending into the shadows. It wasn't clear, but it was there, watching them. "Let's go," Samir said, panic rising in his voice. But before they could move, the whispers returned, louder this time. They seemed to surround the group, growing more urgent, more insistent. The wind picked up, swirling around them, carrying the voices with it. "Who's there?" Ravi called out, though his voice cracked with fear. No one responded, but the whispers continued, echoing through the field. Ajay turned to leave, but something caught his attention. Vikram was staring at the tree, his eyes wide with terror. "Vikram?" Ajay asked, but Vikram didn't respond. He stood frozen, his flashlight pointing toward the tree's upper branches. Ajay followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. Hanging from one of the higher branches was a rope, frayed and weathered, swaying slightly in the wind. And beneath it, just for a moment, Ajay thought he saw a figure, dangling, swaying with the rope. A body, ghostly pale, its face twisted in agony. "Run!" Vikram screamed, snapping out of his trance. The group bolted, their feet pounding the dry earth as they fled the cursed tree. But the wind pursued them, howling in their ears, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. Ajay felt a pressure building in his chest, like something was trying to choke the air from his lungs. They didn't stop running until they were far from the tree, the village lights faint in the distance. Panting, they collapsed onto the ground, their hearts racing. "What the hell was that?" Samir gasped, his face pale with fear. No one answered. They sat in silence, catching their breath, the weight of what they had just experienced settling in. But as they prepared to head back to the village, they realized something. Vikram was missing. "Where's Vikram?" Ajay asked, panic rising in his chest. They called his name, shining their flashlights into the darkness, but there was no sign of him. He had vanished, just like that. "Vikram!" Ajay shouted, his voice cracking. The whispers returned, soft and mocking, carried on the wind. And then, faintly, they heard it, Vikram's voice calling out to them, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from far away. Too far. "Help me!" His voice echoed, barely audible over the howling wind. The group froze, fear rooting them to the spot. Vikram's voice didn't sound right. It was distorted, wrong, like it was being pulled from somewhere deep within the earth. "Let's go," Ravi whispered, his voice trembling. But Ajay couldn't leave. He turned back toward the direction of the banyan tree, his heart pounding in his chest. Vikram's voice continued, growing fainter with each passing second. Ajay knew he couldn't leave his friend behind, but there was something about the way Vikram sounded, like he was already lost. The next morning, search parties scoured the area near the banyan tree, but they found no trace of Vikram. The tree stood silent and still, its roots twisted and gnarled, as though guarding its secrets. The villagers spoke of curses and spirits, warning the group that Vikram was likely lost to the tree's dark magic. But Ajay never forgot what he heard that night. Even now, years later, when the wind howls through the village, he swears he can still hear Vikram's voice, faint and distant, calling out to him from the shadows of the cursed banyan tree.